Well, good morning, everybody. I'm going to go ahead and get started. I am Dr. Joshua Stroud. I'm executive pastor at Woodland Hills Family Church in Branson, Missouri. My wife and I moved there in January. And I'm also executive director of a ministry called To Ignite. It's a ministry that we started out of our church to honor marriage and to enhance marriage in churches across the country, knowing and looking at even secular research that it's a healthy marriage that predicts healthy outcomes behaviorally, academically, sexually, you name it, in children. When they see a healthy marriage, and we're all about taking marriages that are 5s and 6s, not even just rescuing troubled marriages, but people living in just mundane marriages and taking them and making them 10s, where people honor and enjoy marriage before their children. And so that's what I'm about. That's what I do. I'm a PhD in counseling. Lord called me out of the counseling world, if you will, and into the church last year because I believe that if we're going to change this nation, it's got to be within the context of the church. And so that's my heart, my passion. I want to introduce our two speakers. Morgan Perry, you guys already have seen her speak this morning. She did a fantastic job. Morgan is the executive producer of Sex and Money. And you're going to hear from her even more so this morning in terms of the demand and the underlying issues that undergird the sex trafficking industry. And so you're going to hear more from her as well. I also want to introduce Dr. Judith Reisman to you. She's a researcher, author, historian, and teacher, and she has more energy than Morgan and I combined. I'm just telling you, she's the one who said, we get back to the hotel after the event last night, she says, come on, you young people, let's enjoy our time together. How often do we get together? So it was because of her prompting that we spent time together last evening. So
I was ready to go to bed.
I will say, Dr. Reisman is a fireball, and we love her. It's just been a privilege for me to get to know her as a friend as well as a colleague. And so she's been focusing on pornography as a pandemic, addicting men, women, and children, and primarily exposing Dr. Alfred Kinsey's fraudulent sex science research and education.
Yes.
And so what we're going to do today, before we get started, without further ado, I don't want to take up too much of our time introducing ourselves. I just want to jump right in. And we're going to show just about a 12 to 14 minute clip from the video.
Yeah.
And
the Kinsey syndrome, just the end of the video.
It's the epilogue of the Kinsey syndrome.
Yeah.
And so it'll give you, it'll really catch you up to speed on where things are. So we're going to hear from her out of this video to begin. And then each of us are going to just kind of give a little bit of an introduction of our passion and some of the research and things that we're working on and seeing. And then we're going to open it up at the end for hopefully about 35 minutes worth of questions from you guys, okay? So we'll go ahead and get started with the video. If we can, I don't know if we can turn down the lights a little bit.
That'd be good.
With so much devastation affecting America at many levels, the question is, why hasn't something been done about Kinsey's dark legacy? The answers are complicated. Many brush off the continued influence of Kinsey and his disciples because they are told that things have gotten better because of them. It is often reported that sex crimes are diminishing in America, and that rape has supposedly declined by 85% since 1970. Law professor Anthony D'Amato published an essay in 2006 titled Porn Up, Rape Down, crediting the porn industry for this so-called reduction of rape. But leading members of law enforcement strongly disagree. Denver Police Lieutenant James D. Ponzi is a Regis University professor whose research on crime statistics has been presented at Harvard University and published in police journals across the country. Ponzi was quoted in Police Beat in May of 2005. He said, in 1998, Shannon Shiver was raped and murdered.
What happened? I think you turned it off.
I didn't touch anything.
Oh, just hit play.
The lawsuit her parents filed revealed the practice of downgrading sexual crimes. Departments cooked the books to lower crime rates. Lieutenant Ponzi got emails from different departments all over the country regarding statistics being altered in their cities. Ponzi said these lower rape statistics don't reflect what is truly happening in sex-related crimes. The reason for the deception is political pressure to lower crime rates, as partly exposed by a U.S. News and World Report. In April of 2000, they wrote, "Facing political heat to cut crime in the city, investigators in the New York Sex Crime Unit sat on thousands of reports of rapes and other sexual assaults." Police Captain Rich Costello stated that the way crime was solved was with an eraser. In that same year, it was also reported that the FBI conducted a limited investigation and discovered that PPD had failed to report between 13,000 and 37,000 major crimes. Lieutenant Colonel Dave Grossman is a West Point psychology professor and Pulitzer Prize nominee. He is a renowned expert in human aggression and co-author of the book, Stop Teaching Our Kids to Kill. On crime statistics, he says, the downturn in violent crime in the U.S. in the 1990s is very deceptive. Violent crime is still about 5 times greater today per capita than it was in 1957. Grossman says the biggest factor for the lower crime rates is that we are lying about the data. One of the tactics used is to manipulate statistics in a way that gives a false impression to the public. For example, at the beginning of this film, we told you that some 58,200 children are abducted each year by non-family members. This report from the Department of Justice goes on to say that only 115 of these are stereotypical kidnappings. But they define stereotypical kidnapping to include children who are held for ransom or transported a distance of 50 or more miles. The report goes on to say that of the 58,200 children abducted, about half of the victims were sexually assaulted. While most people will be left thinking only about 115 kids, the reality is that at least 29,000 children are kidnapped and raped in America each year. The report also says that this is an underestimate. Researchers like Lieutenant James Ponzi, who we spoke with during our investigation, believe that the real number is much higher than anyone is able to document. As parents and guardians, we should consider again carefully the words of former prosecutor Ann Bremner.
And we also see in a lot of these kidnapping and death cases recently by sex offenders that your child can be lost in just an instant. So I think you have to be vigilant at all times. Be vigilant at all times.
Manipulation of truth and political pressure have continued to protect the influence of Alfred Kinsey and his followers for more than half a century. In the 1980s, the Reagan administration developed a commission to investigate the influence of pornography. The Department of Justice brought in Dr. Judith Reisman, who initially wanted to investigate Kinsey along with the images in Playboy, Penthouse, and Hustler. But just as the Reis Committee was opposed in the 1950s, so Dr. Reisman was shot down in the 1980s. She conducted her research at American University, but once she began, the university vehemently opposed any investigation into Kinsey, and she was forced to drop it.
I said, I'm not doing anything with human subjects. I'm just going to be researching his work, the things that he's already written. And they said, no, you can't do that. So academic freedom was completely eliminated because the Kinsey Institute had some kind of power structure going there that caused them to be unable to allow me to pursue a just United States Department of Justice grant from our country that would have allowed me as an objective researcher to look into the Kinsey research as it stood.
The president of American University at the time was Dr. Richard Berenson, who was later exposed in a sex scandal involving a series of obscene phone calls in which Berenson claimed he had a 4-year-old girl that he kept as a sex slave down in his basement. The calls were eventually traced to his office at American University. Berenson was exposed as a pedophile.
And I spoke with a lawyer later, and it turned out, of course, he had pornography in his drawers. They cleaned out the office, got rid of the pornography, though they found out later, the lawyer did, that it had been there. And he quickly fled, ran to Johns Hopkins University, and entered there and stayed there for, I think it was 3 weeks, and got a clean bill of health from Johns Hopkins, saying that...
Like psychiatric treatment?
Yes. Yes, suddenly he was okay.
But political opposition came not only from American University, but also in Washington, D.C., over the analysis of Playboy, Penthouse, and Hustler. As a result, Dr. Reisman was forced to publish a report independently. The FBI and 7-Eleven took notice, as we mentioned earlier, and that's when the soft porn giants fought back. In her book, The Powerhouse, journalist Susan B. Trento documents how Playboy and Penthouse magazines hired a Washington-based PR firm named Gray & Company to create a media blitz that would discredit Dr. Reisman and the entire Reagan Commission on pornography. She writes that dealing with Judith Reisman was not difficult. Since Reisman was without political savvy and lacked allies, she made a most appealing target for discrediting. Trento says that Gray & Company charged between $50,000 and $75,000 per month for the campaign against Dr. Reisman, and that for this particular account, much of the cost was borne by Playboy. Penthouse also provided funding. Because of the controversy, it would be a decade later before Dr. Reisman's research would be officially embraced by the Department of Justice. In a letter written by past administrator Robert Sweet, he says, while the massive affluent sex industry has employed nearly every technique in their arsenal, short of violence, to stop Dr. Reisman's work, they have not shown her findings to be incorrect or methodologically flawed in even the smallest detail.
Why don't you care more about the children than you do about protecting the finances of the sex industry and the sex establishment?
Judah, the sex industry. Tell me about this sex industry.
Dr. Reisman has for years argued against the harmful impact of the sex industry on America's children. Many of the PhDs who teach in our universities have not only been associated with the Journal of Pedophilia, but have also served as the board members for pornographic magazines like Penthouse Forum. These are the people who have designed the programs for sex education in America. Because Kinsey chose to define the pain and suffering of abused children as orgasm, he then argued that children were sexual from birth and should be taught about having sex as soon as possible. While most who promote the programs probably don't know it, this thinking is what lies behind the idea of teaching sex education to kindergartners.
I remember him using this in his campaign against me, saying Barack Obama supports teaching sex education to kindergartners. And, which I don't know what to tell him. But it's the right thing to do. To provide age-appropriate sex education, science-based sex education, science-based sex education in schools.
Remember that this science-based sex education begins with the so-called scientific data gathered by Kinsey's pedophiles and recorded by him in his sex reports. Something that Kinsey's followers continue to insist is relevant in teaching our children today.
These specific findings about these children are totally irrelevant to modern sex education.
Consider again this image of a teacher showing what appears to be 6- and 7-year-old girls how to use a condom. Who will this 7-year-old be using a condom with? When you consider that the PhDs who have designed these programs openly support the pedophile philosophy, we can only wonder, is sex education really intended to protect America's children, or to condition them for seduction at the hands of a child molester? Why are America's children disappearing? For those who study the influence of Alfred Kinsey, the answer becomes more than clear. The Kinsey Institute continues to lead the way in sex education and continues to be funded by the American taxpayer. Dr. Reisman believes the Institute should come under an official investigation, something she was prevented from doing during her time at the Department of Justice.
The Kinsey Institute was so frightened that the truth would come out. That time it was Reinisch, and then later it would be Bancroft, that they threatened lawsuits to everybody. And they pulled out every stop. They put the arm on everyone, politically and institutionally. Their Rockefeller grants, their money, their funding from all kinds of other people would be pulled into play to stop Reisman from looking at the information that was right out there, that belongs in the hands of the American public, so that the American public can make their own decisions about whether this is true, whether I'm wrong and I should be sued or put in jail or something, fine. Or whether they're wrong and we need to have a proper investigation so that the American public knows the truth about our history and how come we're getting to where we are where we are in terms of the kinds of violence that are taking place in society and violence to children.
We are told that our founding fathers went to war so that America might be free. But how they would respond, we can only wonder. If they could see our country today and witness how we now define that original liberty for which brave men fought and died.
Write your questions down because I know you all have them. I'm going to go ahead and let Morgan present her piece as well. Next, go ahead.
Sure. Well, I'm not going to talk too long because I want to leave a lot of room for questions, and then I shared some this morning. But I guess what would be relevant is talking a little bit more about the family and why we want to do a documentary about the breakdown of the family in America. Sex and money really does get into what we're facing right now with the abuse of sex and abuse of money in America. But the breakdown of the family is one of the primary elements that demand was its own documentary, as we discovered. So what we'll attempt to answer is why 1 in 4 girls and 1 in 6 boys will experience some form of sexual abuse before the age of 18, and why the majority of these victims report that the abusers are from within their homes or from someone familiar as opposed to complete strangers. We'll also seek to answer why the majority of sex trafficking victims, child abuse victims, and runaways in America are coming from the foster care system. And most importantly, we'll look at alternatives and solutions to these devastating realities. So yes, when we say the breakdown of the family, we're talking about sexual abuse in the home, the original family unit breaking up, the foster care system, and how that's feeding not just sex trafficking but abortion and even the breakdown of our educational system, all these hot topic issues. So we feel the tipping point of that film will be the issue of abortion and how that's one of the biggest expressions of the severity of this issue we have in society, along with sex trafficking and these other issues. But I'm also available to answer questions about the Sex and Money documentary and more of what Dr. Riesman will be sharing about too. So that's all I have to share. No, go for it.
What?
I was just going to say one of the areas of research that I do. I work a lot with younger males, younger men, and it's also infiltrated women as well today. But that's the epidemic of pornography, and you're seeing the roots, the core roots of this. As a counselor and a researcher in the area of psychology, my understanding of psychology and my study of psychology has done nothing to my biblical faith except enhance it and strengthen it, because everything that I've ever read in secular research and study about human behavior proves the Bible even more true. And so it's just that we choose to highlight, you see the fraudulent ways that secular research is being done. And so one of the amazing things that I get to do, and I think this is important for each of us, not even from a biblical standpoint, but from a scientific standpoint of what pornography does to the brain, you can show that we're going to have us a crisis in the coming years in marriages across America, with the statistics of number of young men and women that are viewing pornography online on a regular basis, what it's doing to their brains. It's inhibiting their ability to connect in long-term attachment relationships. And it's shown through various research studies that are done with montane voles, prairie voles, if you're familiar with that research at all. And prairie voles, if you will, are they're one of 3% of mammal species that's monogamous. It stays with their partner throughout their lifespan. Humans are one of those. Their montane cousin is more than 99% like them genetically, and they are not monogamous. And research has shown what the difference is, and it's oxytocin and vasopressin in the brain, and it's the secretion of oxytocin and vasopressin in the brain. But what ends up happening through pornography and through one-night stands, if you will, or promiscuous sex, is what's known as a sexual imprinting on the brain. It's why women who are in abusive relationships tend to stay in abusive relationships, because there's a sexual imprinting that takes place in the brain. It's also why our ability to be able to break up, if you will, after having sex outside of marriage is so difficult, because there's a connection there, and I'm not even talking about the soul connection at this point. I'm just talking about the physiological connection that's taking place in the context of the brain. And it inhibits the ability to connect in long-term attachment relationships. And I believe it's going to destroy our marriages in the future. What it's doing right now is it's preventing people from getting married. And so people are just cohabitating, and they're bouncing from relationship to relationship, trying to get that emotional high. And lust, romantic love, and long-term attachment all look very different in the brain. Lust and one-night stands, it releases endogenous opioids in the brain, which is the body's equivalent to opioids, to heroin. Okay? So when you're having one-night stands and you're bouncing from relationship to relationship, it's like you're on heroin. It's triggering the same part of the brain. When you're in love, and you're just in that, googly, oh, she likes chocolate cupcakes and so do I, we're meant for each other kind of stage, you know what I mean? But when you're in that stage, your body, your brain is triggering the same parts of the brain as being on cocaine. And so, but when you're in a long-term healthy attachment relationship, a marriage, you're secreting oxytocin and vasopressin in the brain in a way that's healthy and in a way that has not been corrupted by all these other images and all these other things. So this is completely from the context of brain chemistry, neuroscience, and this isn't even out of the Bible. Now, I'll just turn to the Bible real quickly and then we'll open it up.
Can you please move this? A lot of us can't.
Oh, sure, absolutely, yeah. Sorry about that.
Oh, we got it.
From the Bible's perspective,
Good to see you.
See everybody.
Yeah.
Sorry about that. In Matthew chapter 5, verse 8, Jesus, in the Sermon on the Mount, says, "Blessed are those who are pure at heart, for they shall see God." Just reverse that. If you're not pure at heart, what's that mean? You can't see God. And if you can't see God, as Morgan preached to us this morning, if you can't see God, there's not an outflowing here. You're not going to be able to see all this other stuff, because all you're going to do is have your personal needs met. And every single one of them, I'm telling you, every single one of you in this room is wicked, corrupt, and deceitful without Jesus Christ. And I mean, that's why in counseling there's a $1 billion industry for anger management and aggression. We're not trying to teach people to be aggressive and angry. We're trying to teach them the opposite. Yes. Why? Because the human condition is flawed. And without Jesus Christ, we're going to go out this way. And so I want to promote that whole idea that, listen, here's what this is doing in the brains of people watching this stuff online, these images that are nothing but idols. And this is how it's impacting relationship with God, and ultimately the ability to love selflessly, altruistically other people. And so that's where my passion is and where I'm at. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to open it up, and I'm just going to open it up to you guys to comment on anything that you have. In fact, I want to ask this, because here's what I want to do, and this is what, when we started dialoguing about this panel, the thing I asked them to do was give me the takeaways. I want you guys to be able to walk away. What are we going to walk away with practically that we can say, here's what we want to do to engage culture, and here's how we can do that. What's the weakest link in the liberal attack?
Yeah, well, it's what I spent 45 years trying to, get. It's Kinsey. And the reason it's Kinsey, is because when you have a simple target that is thoroughly understood by everybody, and Kinsey provided that for us. He's got these tables, which you can take into any kind of any Planned Parenthood conference, any school board conference, in which the American Legislative Exchange Council produced a document defending it, what we said, and saying, go to your legislators with this. It's a table. You didn't see it up there, but everybody, I have a few of these videos. You should get it. You really should, because this gives the background to why we have the pandemic of rape and torture of our women and our children, boys and girls today. Okay, so you have a chart. It's from Kinsey's book. He's recognized everywhere as the father of the sexual revolution, the father of human sexuality. Liam Neeson played him in this big film. He's a big hero, Liam Neeson. And that chart will give you a 2-month-old baby being sexually abused and timed with a stopwatch. You take that bloody thing. I never lose. When I was in Donahue tried so hard not to put those charts up. And I'm yelling and yelling and yelling. He finally puts the chart up. He didn't want to. And the entire audience, a massive audience, all Donahue lovers, were outraged, not at me. They said, what are you talking about, a 4-year-old having 26 orgasms in 24 hours? Oh. Who did that, right? You've won. You have won. And what you do is I don't show this to you here, but anyway, you lay down exactly, okay, that's the father of human sexuality. Who's quoting him? When you go into the courtrooms, all our court decisions on sex, Lawrence versus everything, have been based on experts who come in and who override biblical common law, and they come in and they say, well, then you say, well, what's your background, Dr. Schmogegi? Where did you get your degree? And he's an expert in sex and so forth. So that is a major target. It is the weakest link, and it will win every time. Any kind of debate, any kind of argument. But you have to learn about it and all that sort of stuff.
But people perish because of a lack of knowledge.
Before I quit, erototoxins. Eros, the toxic side of Eros, is pornography. Got a nice neurosurgeon just broke that down for me using that terminology. You have to remember that when people are in love with someone, they don't fear them and they don't have shame and they don't have all of these other high arousal states. When somebody is looking at something they shouldn't be looking at, like what's in our hotel, the Sheraton, dirty little schoolgirls in the hotel, all right? No, that's another weak link. No church, no body of religious believers should ever have a conference where people are going to be staying at a place that's selling pornography. But anyway, I'll just say this one more thing. Okay.
She doesn't have a lot of passion.
No. But people have to understand the link between fear, shame, anger, hatred, and genital response mechanisms. To the retina, to the back, to the visual cortex, down the central nervous system. Where does it end? It ends in the reproductive organs. So that's a direct pattern. And people don't have it. We're not designed to see these bizarre things. And so fear, shame, linked with sexual arousal is going to cause that high arousal state. That's why Johnny says, I guess I don't love Jane anymore. Jane says, I guess I don't love Johnny anymore. Because the high arousal state isn't there. But that's because they care about each other. And so there's a balancing. I'm through.
And I'm going to move to Morgan. How is the breakdown of the family connected to sex trafficking?
Mm-hmm. Well, the majority of the sex trafficking victims in the United States are actually native-born American citizens. A lot of people think it's girls coming in from Southeast Asia or Eastern Europe, which that is a percentage, but the majority are American children, and the vast majority of these girls are not randomly kidnapped off the street, although that does happen, like the movie Taken. What is the norm are that these girls are coming from broken families. They're runaways. So the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, they estimate that there's around 1.7 million runaways every year in the United States. And they've now had to the Department of Justice has had to come out with 2 categories for runaway kids. Runaways, where the parents or guardians actually report them missing, and throwaway children, where no one reports them missing, no one tries to find them, and that bracket of the population is growing rapidly. Mm-hmm. And so these sex trafficking victims are runaways, the vast majority of them. So that leaves us to ask the question, well, what are they running away from? Why are they running away? And that is where the breakdown of the family comes in. And again, the majority of these kids are coming from the foster care system. So the majority of them have been sexually abused. So, you just keep hearing the same stories over and over again. You have to ask, well, why isn't the church taking over the issue of the breakdown of the family, meaning providing what our government is providing as a foster care system? Why don't we have these healthy families taking in kids that are runaways or throwaways instead of these sometimes broken families that want a check from the government to take in a child, and then they're just sexually abused and then they run away and they're back out on the street. Yeah. And the estimate is that a child who's run away from home within 48 hours will be recruited into prostitution in the United States. So that's just huge. That shows how big this problem really is. So that's how we see the connection between the breakdown of the family. That's one of the ways, but that's a very big way.
And one of the other things too that I want to make mention of that I think is important is just the rise of not even just pornography, but also online sexual conversation. And it's happening a lot among Christians. And it's because of the shame and guilt and that kind of thing. And we've got to a place where intercourse is not appropriate, but everything else is. And hooking up, even in and of itself, we live in a hooking up culture, so to speak. Some of the statistics show that as many as almost 70% of young people hook up with a friend just sexually, just to hook up. And the oxytocin and vasopressin are continually being, secreted into the brain during this process. And as a result, what's happening? I just heard a story the other day. True story is 2 young Christian teenagers know each other, acquaintances. They go to the same church. They were sitting on their computers, each at their homes, and they were writing back and forth in very explicit ways of what they would do to one another and that kind of thing. They showed up at church on Sunday morning, and they looked at one another very awkwardly because they don't have that type of relationship physically. They don't even know each other all that well. But yet over the computer, they're getting fulfilled, eros, if you will, by back and forth talk. And so this is happening in our Christian communities. It's happening across the board, and it's being manifested in many, many different ways. And so I also want to ask, as you guys were talking about that, you mentioned it of young ladies. You mentioned of young ladies. I want to ask the question: how did we get to a place in society where we're prostituting children, if you will, you know, to appease sexual perversion?
Well, I mean, we were reading them back, and one of the things that I mentioned to you, I was sued by Playboy magazine, in Holland. Okay, now that's the center of pedophilia in Europe, or it has been. Now places are vying for precedent. But anyway, so I was sued by Playboy in Holland. Why? Because I was on a TV station. This is back in 1994, and I said that Playboy at that time was the #1 child pornographer in the United States, well, and globally anyway. So everybody, what do you mean child pornography? Child, yes, CHILD. That is under age 18, right? Okay. So we found that in our research for the United States Department of Justice. So Playboy sues me there. And look, we won in Holland. Why did we win? Because the pictures are there. It's fully documented. They trained the grandfathers of our folks here. They trained them with the cartoons to dehumanize the child, sex with daddy, sex with uncle, sex with this one, sex with that one, in cartoons in Playboy. Then they moved those cartoons in slowly of boys, initially just in certain scenes, to girls, and then from the girls black and white into full color, full page. This is deliberate, this is strategic. And then from there into photographs. So Playboy had conditioned grandpas, was bringing them. Now grandpa thought he was looking at a girly magazine. The father then goes one step further because you're developing the addiction with the penthouse stuff, from the penthouse stuff to the hustler stuff, from the hustler stuff to the internet stuff. So you've conditioned people now for the past 50 years, 60 years to view children based on Kinsey's garbage. Remember, Hugh Hefner called himself Kinsey's pamphleteer. Hugh Hefner was a virgin in college. Let's understand. Everybody we were virgins back then. College guys, somebody my age. Yeah. College. Thank you. True? You're gonna back me up? Okay. So, it was standard. Boys and girls, college boys and girls wanted to save themselves for their beloved, right? Yes. The guys did, the girls did. Can you believe that out there? Yeah. And Hefner was one of them. And so he called himself Kinsey's pamphleteer because he read Kinsey, believed that garbage, and said, oh gosh, everybody's been doing all this, and I'm the only one that didn't get to do it, and now I'm going to change the world, and he did. So you conditioned a nation, and now here we are. We're prostituting our babies. We're cannibalizing our own. And we're even doing it in our hotels. That is my comment.
I think I would share, again, some of what I shared this morning, that we feel the 5 primary elements of demand that have brought us to this point are pornography, prostitution, poverty, the commercialization of sex in mainstream media, and the breakdown of the family, which includes, child sexual abuse from a young age, that type of thing. But especially with pornography. I was at a human rights conference at the UN several years ago, and they played this documentary called The Price of Pleasure, and I would not recommend it. I was trapped in an aisle with people, so I couldn't get out. It was just, but I mean, they basically showed the evolution of porn for what it is. So they showed how far it's come and then forecast how much worse it's going to get. And what devastated me the most about the video was what they considered mainstream softcore pornography. It was horrific. And in the Sex and Money documentary, we interview a woman who represents a production company called We Abuse Sluts. And it's all, the softcore, hardcore stuff. And then we have a psychotherapist who explains how you get desensitized to watching this little bit and then you want to get the same amount of arousal, so you have to go to this bigger bit, and then you just keep on going. And so what I shared this morning is if the average age of exposure to pornography is 7 years old, then they have their whole lifespan to want rougher and harder and more grotesque versions of pornography. And then we interviewed the founder of XXXchurch.com, and he says that he always advises people that whatever you are looking at online is eventually going to take you offline. Mm-hmm. So there's also this thing within the United States with prostitution. It is illegal. It's only legal in a few counties in Nevada, but it's everywhere. And men still don't have that understanding that these girls probably aren't there by choice, that we're having to redefine the difference between sex trafficking and prostitution in America. But when you've got the issue of pornography, what they think they're doing in their own home, just involving them, eventually taking them offline because they just can't get satisfied enough anymore. And what we're running into are the babyrape.com stories. And, you know, and to me, when I was watching that film, The Price of Pleasure, another thing that stood out was this case called Ashcroft versus Free Speech. And it was about these digital images of infants with men, adult men, and it was this brand of pornography that was out, and it was making millions of dollars. And the problem with it, I mean, there's everything's wrong with that, but what took them to the Supreme Court was that the images were so realistic, people couldn't tell if they were real or not. So people wanted them to be eliminated from the porn industry. Well, Ashcroft versus Free Speech ended up winning that case, saying that it is computer, you know, it's digitally put together. Therefore, if you're going to take this out, you have to take out, you know, Texas Chainsaw Massacre or other things in Hollywood that look, and you do,
exactly
but
right.
they won
Exactly
their case
right.
because they were saying that it's protected under free speech. Just because they're really good at what they do and they make it look realistic doesn't mean that they, you know, Supreme Court should take away their freedom to do that. And that is a huge problem, obviously, because we've got these really realistic images that are protected under our Constitution, and it drives us to wanting the real thing.
They're not protected.
They should not.
No, they aren't protected under the Constitution. No. Images, that's the problem with the U.S. Supreme Court right now. We have to re-educate the U.S. Supreme Court. Mm-hmm. Images are not protected speech. No way. They're not even protected expression. Right. They're not protected speech because they function in the human brain in a completely different way. And I did the Mapplethorpe trial, and we got that clear in the Mapplethorpe trial. It just hasn't been used in print, so I'm working with Cynthia. So the images are processed completely differently. They're processed emotionally, they're processed in the gut, they short-circuit the frontal cortex, they short-circuit cognition, and so all of our cases in terms of Planned Parenthood, teaching sex in the classroom, there is no such thing as using sexual images at all that would be covered really by the by First Amendment. It can be eliminated, that protection, which means yes, and I did this at a Pepperdine once, and the place was filled with pornography people, and the silence was deafening, because what it really means is once you can get that clear in the minds of enough people on the court, and that's possible, then the Chainsaw Massacre is out. And yes, a lot of other things that we're accepting as, quote, artistic are out, because it's not, there is no informed consent that you can give to an image. It's not processed like text. It's completely different.
I'm going to go ahead and open it up for questions. Open the panel for questions. Yeah, go ahead.
Yes.
Pastor Straub, you mentioned sexual imprinting of the brain, and how much of that is correctable?
Well, with the Lord, all things are
I understand that, but I mean, scientific.
It's correctable. Depending on the level. It's called dose-response relationship. So what you're looking at is a dose, the amount of dosing that you had. So how severe the abuse or how severe the sex was, whether it was, you know, once in a while or whether it was every single night, how much that person was looking at pornography, and also then the duration of that. So you're looking at the severity and the duration, and all of that, both of those two things plays a role in how well it's treated long term. So for somebody who is, and I've seen people by the grace of God, but it's only when they turn their life over to Christ. That's
step one.
That's step one. But still, there's behavioral and physiological issues that are still there. Even though the Holy Spirit's indwelled them, there are things that it takes years and years and years of working with individuals to overcome that, and it takes accountability. It takes true, and I say this to husbands and wives. Morgan's getting married, and she was just proposed to a month ago. So, but when she told me yesterday, and I know her fiance, but when she said this to me, she says, "He's my best friend." And my wife is my best friend. And I think that this has to start, so no matter what you've been through in the past, your spouse needs to become your best friend. And I don't care, I encourage people to make sure that there's one person in the whole world that knows everything about you. You should have no secrets, nothing that you're taking to your grave, because those secrets, you are as sick as your secrets. And as we have a best friend in our lives, people who can keep you accountable to things, it's amazing what can overcome. So the more that you put accountability around a guy, and when I was younger, one of the things I did was I signed up for Covenant Eyes, and you have Covenant Eyes is a website where an accountability partner will get every single website that you've been to, and instead of making it guys, I made it my mom. Because if there's one person you don't want to see, if you're really serious, and I tell guys this all the time, if you're really serious about getting right, make somebody an accountability partner that's going that when they see it, you don't want them seeing it.
That's good. I like it.
And so the more we can increase in love, and I know this sounds cliche as Christians, but the more we realize what Christ did on the cross for us, and the more we can love, the more selfless we become, and the more this stuff is purged, if you will, out of our lives, because we pour into other people. And that's what I encourage and counsel guys to do who struggle with this. But they need somebody who they can walk with every single day with them, because otherwise.
Mark Leisman has done some tremendous work in that area.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Mark Laser is a dear friend, and he is, any of Dr. Mark Laser's research and things you can get, please get your hands on them, because he's probably the single best, or at least most well-known Christian sex.
What's his last name?
Laser, Dr. Mark Laser, Laase, or Laaser. It's 2 A's.
And what does he do?
Yeah, I'm sorry?
What does he do?
He's a sex addiction specialist, sex therapist, yep.
LA.
Out of Minnesota.
He's come out of it.
Yeah, he's come out of it
Yeah.
himself, yeah.
Yeah, which
Yeah.
is the way it is
Yeah.
with most guys who are, deal with this
Yep.
exclusively.
Absolutely.
They are people who have been in recovery, and one of the ways to maintain recovery
Absolutely.
is to outreach to help other people.
Yeah.
I don't want to forget to say one thing,
Go ahead.
and that is one of the key components nobody wants to talk about in pornography is all pornography instantaneously, really, essentially, leads to impotence. You're talking about impotent men and impotent women when they're kind of, involved in it, and we have more and more women involved. But yeah, impotence is the key component. They cannot function. Think about the definition, if a person can only function as God designed them, when they either imagine a fantasy, or if they're looking at a fantasy, they are by definition, potency means with your own power. You are potent with your own power. Impotence means you are without your own power. So you've turned your power over to these guys. And so anybody who uses pornography is impotent. And I hate that word. But that's what it is. Yeah.
I want to make a mention too, just real quickly. Deb Laser, his wife, also has a book out on women who their husbands have been caught in pornography or who are sexually addicted, and helping women through that. It's Deb Laser, his wife, Deb. Yeah, she has a book out on that. So anyway, yeah, big resource. Yeah, go ahead.
My question's actually going to go
before that, to the Occident, the prevention, and I heard you mention about the sexualness in the media. So I have a teenager and 3 coming up for that, and it's just everywhere. It's overwhelming, and I mean, we do the whole don't have the TV, and I'm still just exhausted from the daily fight. It seems to constantly censor it, but it still seems to be coming. My one seems to be drawn just to, the in group, the in crowd. So any advice, anything on that? I mean, is it, I honestly could do the cold turkey, never hear a non-Christian, I mean, kind of seclude them, but I don't know that that's going to make her happy. Well, I know it's not actually, but so with that, any advice or suggestions?
Well, I think the best way, I mean, this is what worked for me, was seeing how it's connected to an issue or a cause that I'm really seriously committed to. And within our generation, we care about everything. We wear the Tom shoes. We want all of our actions to be connected to helping somebody if we can. We just need that education. And so I think that's been very effective in young guys and girls, just realizing that if you choose to put your money towards Sex and the City, which in high school that was like my favorite show, and I'm like, I can't believe I watched that. But seriously, now I see the connection, and it's no light thing. I really had to repent and ask for forgiveness, and just take all that stuff off my computer, off my iPod, and I just won't put my money towards that anymore. And at the end of the day, these people, the industry, the media, or the mainstream media, they just want to make money. And so as the church, if we rally together and just stop buying the stuff, stop putting our money towards that, we could make a big difference with what the market is producing, because we are the market. So I think that message is actually working quite well in the people that we work with, that we're able to reach through the documentary, but it all comes through education. So I would highly recommend anyone watching the documentary, because people, they just don't understand until you tell them how severe the consequences are of each of our decisions. But that is really put together well in the documentary, and that's making a big difference.
Is that the documentary you just saw?
No, that's the one I produced, Sex and Money, A National Search for Human Worth. And you can order that DVD on our website, which is sexandmoneyfilm.com. It's all spelled out. But don't forget the film part, sexandmoneyfilm.com. We're not the other website. So, but that's very helpful.
No, go ahead. Yeah, go ahead.
AFA, the American Family, that one with John Wilder. He had an article on sex overcoming all that stuff, and you had a picture in there of the brain. It was very, very, it brings to your attention when anyone has sex together, it's the bonding. It shows the brain, the picture in the brain, and how everything comes together, and there is a bonding. I have a young ministry, and I work with a lot of girls. They have they call it soul ties, but they don't realize that act bonds them to that person, and that is a picture. I don't know, it's above the brain, might be what you were talking about.
Yeah.
And that was an eye opener to me.
Yeah. Well, and let me turn this to the positive. Let me turn that to the positive. It's amazing the way that God created our brains to connect with the one that we're supposed to be with, our one flesh, for life. It's amazing how God created us. I mean, He's our creator and a redeemer. He's amazing. Anyway, so yes, I mean, I want to turn that to the positive.
That's good education.
I'm sorry?
It's tied into the reprobate mind.
Yeah.
Where He turns us over to the reprobate mind. That's in reference to what's happening.
Yeah,
I
absolutely.
think the more we have that documented, it can help.
Yeah, it's one of my terms. Yeah, go ahead.
Yes, I believe Focus on the Family had some kind of a preventive program about pornography. Are you familiar with that?
I'm not sure what brand they have, but there are several. There's one called Covenant Eyes, which is really great. There's another one through XXX Church, an accountability one. And maybe you could speak to if there's more.
Yeah, Triple X Church and Focus, Covenant Eyes is run by Focus and Family. That's the one that's one I was talking about. So if you get a guy to sign up on that, you know, all the proceeds go to Focus and Family. And then Triple X Church is another resource.
Because of women to intercede on behalf of these kinds of things, what could be shown to them, because I think a lot of times women are protectors of our household in one way, and then what programs we might provide for the church women.
To help.
You mean to help women who?
No, to take a stand.
Oh, just to take a stand against it. Yeah.
And pray.
Yeah. I mean, I would start right here. I would start with the Kinsey syndrome, and then with these two women right here and what they have going on, I would start right there for sure.
And I would suggest that a group like this might propose that all church conferences, all church meetings, all church anything associated that reflects Jesus Christ ought not to be held in any hotel that sells pornography. It used to be that, wouldn't you think maybe that might be a good, strong suggestion to come through? We used to say, some people, they used to say, well, when we come into your hotel, we want it turned off in our room. That's very nice. No, you don't want to give your money to it's up to you. You don't want to give your money to the hotel that is profiting off the bodies and the souls of human beings, and bringing that material to the people that are in the hotel who are maybe tempted, in recovery, not in so on and so on. It's absolutely, I think it's a simple thing to do, and you could make, if every church group stopped going to a hotel that sells this stuff, you would close down pornography in hotels.
Dr. Reisman, do you know any hotels that don't?
Yes, of course. Yeah, Omni doesn't. And then there's, what do they call it, the clean hotels? You have to look at, I didn't come provide. There's a thing called Clean Hotels or something. They don't. And then there was a beautiful hotel I just lectured at a couple months ago. I don't remember. And beautiful one, Gettysburg. In Gettysburg, gorgeous hotel. And I opened up my presentation saying, I didn't have a chance to check to see if you're doing porn here, but I'm going to check. And I thought for sure they did. And I was really angry that they did, but they didn't. So I was able to go back and say, hey, So I would hold every convention every conference at that hotel or any of the others like that.
Yeah. Go ahead.
This might be a touchy subject, but do you consider Victoria's Secret's pornography? Because I do, and I fight against it. But
sure.
Can I answer that as a guy who that magazine shows up? As Victoria's Secret considered pornography? And I every time I'm in a mall with my wife, I will turn my head, or she'll warn me ahead of time, and she doesn't get it, because if that thing showed up, I just don't want to be tempted by that.
Right.
As a man, absolutely, I would not want to look at that.
I'll add that when I am in a mall, my grandkids always used to say, "Oh, look over here, Grandma," and steer me away.
That's great.
Even the children now.
Yeah. Oh, no. Look at that up there.
Right. And that's back to the commercialization of sex in mainstream media too. Like in our documentary, we show how these things have fed into one another, but that's
and I don't understand why you need to have words written across your rear end. So that's just as a personal. Go ahead.
Just for our awareness, I have belonged to Groupon. Groupon on computer. Just got the letter yesterday from one of these family-oriented places, telling about some of the things that they sell. And so I sent a letter, signed a petition, sent a letter when I got home last night, because what I read about this company that they promote out in San Francisco was appalling, was horrific. And I wrote a letter, and I got a letter back, and I got it late last night when I got home from here. And I just wanted to weep, because they said, well, we appreciate your note, but we've investigated, and this company's very well respected in the community and does wonderful things. And it's just flat out horrific rubbish. And so, I mean,
Yeah.
We have to vote with our money. We have to say, that's it. I'm sorry, I don't like good deals you give me because I don't like what's attached to it.
Yeah.
And I think part of this is educating everybody that you can. I mean, I have 1,500 friends on Facebook. You all have, most people have Facebook. You have your wealth of friends. Push to these, because, if each one of us were to put some information that we learned today on this on our Facebooks, we're reaching how many people just in this room. And so those kinds of things I think are important. So, back to the back.
You mentioned that it starts young. And as a pastor, as we try to move and work with parents to make them aware of this, maybe it's just where we are. It's like there's an automatic shield that goes up. Like you're not supposed to talk about that. How do you go past that in making parents bring them to the point where they're not ignorant of or unwilling to fight that battle?
Yeah.
As a pastor, how do you overcome that barrier?
Yeah. That's a great question. This soapbox for me, this is one of my takeaways, so this might be my last point because I want those guys to finish up. But, at our church, I pastor at a church called Woodland Hills Family Church. We are a family church. It's in Branson, Missouri. I'm actually doing a sermon in a couple weeks on this. We recently have done away with a youth pastor position, if you will, and we're not going to have a youth pastor. We have family pastors. And the concept behind that is parents spend on average 3,000 hours a year with their kids. Youth pastors spend about 40 hours per year. And yet parents dump their kids off and their teenagers off at the church expecting the youth pastor because they're supposed to be the expert in discipling their kids.
Sometimes the other ones.
We are pushing parents to step up to the plate to be the main disciplers of their kids. And that's the goal, is because we have to impact parents, and parents don't necessarily know how to disciple their kids. And so we as a church want to give them the tools to disciple their kids. That's one thing. And then the second thing is that everything that we do, we're pushing a lot of this from the pulpit. So we'll have PG-13 messages, and our senior pastor is very good about this, where we just talk openly to the congregation about a lot of these things. And we're very clear that we're not, in raising your children, you're not coming up with, excuse my language, but tillywhacker or all these other words that we like to use, but we're going to teach them appropriate, age-sensitive, not scientific based, biblically based sexual education. And so anything that we do from the pulpit, we then have the curriculum from elementary school on up, where we're teaching our children the same kind of a thing. And so we promote that, listen, as parents, you need to have these conversations with your kids age appropriately, in the car when you pick them up from school, when you take them home. But part of it, and you're asking how because they're so blinded, and they are blinded, is showing them the facts. We've got to show them the facts. We've got to show them the knowledge of what's taking place in the community and and out there, so that parents can, not to scare them, but to scare them, to frighten them. That, this is what's going on. And if you're not involved in your children's lives, your children will get sucked right into it. Because there's a million voices screaming for our kids' attention every day, and a 20-minute message at a church on a Sunday morning is going to go in one ear and out the other, kind of thing. So we've got to infiltrate.
Let me add something to that, and that is one of the biggest problems we've had for years now with our parents is that they have been co-opted by the so-called experts, right? They think that, that they've been told that they don't know enough, okay? And one of the things I always try to say is that when you look at the data, that when the people with the degrees, the real degrees, that was the MOM and the DAD, when they trained their children, however they chose to do it, about sex, before the PhDs and the rate of rape was here, not there. The rate of sexual transmitted diseases was here, not there. The rate of every form of human transvestites, gay, lesbian, all of it was here, not there, right? So the degrees, the MOM, the DAD, were solid degrees. And when mom and dad in those years didn't know enough to go into all the detail about how everything interacts, okay, and they would say, look, you know, no, go do the dishes. You know, not for you now, not for you now, go do the dishes. Not for you now, go do your homework. That wasn't maybe the best thing in the world, and maybe even can't sort of do it now. Now you have to kind of talk about it a little bit. But they have to be the ones that have faith in themselves and in their Bible. Go to the Bible. It's all in the Bible, isn't it? Find the right, you know, the right quotes in the Bible and say, now that's why, you know, you don't do these things.
Yeah.
Cover the eyes and all. I'm no biblical expert, but it's there.
Go ahead.
I just wanted to make a comment about parents. I know most of us here are Christian people. We probably know this, but first thing is knowledge empowers us, biblical knowledge especially. We are spiritual people. As parents, all my children are raised. My youngest is 20. But when things come up on TV, and let's take, like you were talking about, the TV. TV is the biggest. Oh my goodness. You know, the women in the underwear on the commercials and all that. The first time we saw one of those on TV, my husband says, Mom, there's women on TV in their underwear. He was like, what is this? Now it's accepted, but I want to get back to parents. Parents. When my youngest is 20, remember the TV show Friends, the most popular, one of the most popular sitcoms ever, long running, you know. I can remember the incident where Rachel and the other roommate were both fighting for the one condom in the house because they both had their boyfriends over. And I sat my girls down and, you know, I said, okay, let's talk about this. When a situation in the world presents itself, parents, it's a great opportunity to pause the TV and tell them, what does the Word say versus what does the world teach? We cannot change everything, but we can make an influence on our own children and grandchildren. If that's the most we do, we've won as far as I'm concerned, because then they teach their children and they teach somebody else. You don't know who the future Moses is. You don't know who the future Joshua is. You don't know. But you as a parent, do what you can do and teach your children, and God will back up your words.
Preach it. Okay, I'm going to take one more question and then we'll have to wrap up. Go ahead.
I don't have much of a word, but
yeah.
What can we do as a church to set a new standard for our culture? Like what actions can we take so that we can have as much more influence than these theories have had on our culture, so that we can turn it around and the Christians can again be in control of media and education and the arts.
Sure.
Or the offense,
Yes. I will never forget when we were on the road filming the documentary and we were having one of these discussions about, oh, this is what media is doing wrong, and and one of the journalists in our group, Tim, he was like, you know what? I'm so tired about complaining about media. Let's just start making good movies.
There you go.
And I was like, ding, ding, ding. It's so true that whatever your gift set is, it doesn't have to be filmmaking, but that plays a big role. Whatever your gift set is, use it for the glory of God and do it with high standards and with integrity, and people around you will want to follow that and will want to pay attention to what you're doing. And I just wanted to speak to the role of the church and pastors with talking about sexuality and really all of this. I was so surprised when we first went on the 50-state tour. I was like, what pastor in their right mind is going to let a bunch of young YWAMers with a campaign called Sex and Money come into their church and talk to their congregation? But we booked churches all over the country, and as soon as we were done, you saw the photographs from Liberty University, people were coming up and they were like, thank you so much for talking about it. Like, I've prayed for so many women who've I've never been able to talk to someone about my sexual abuse before. And I'm like, well, why wouldn't you talk to your family? Why wouldn't, and men saying the same thing about pornography, but they need that open door, and the church is such a safe place for them to experience that. And there is always that awkward thing. I mean, every time I go up to public speak in a faith-based or any setting and I'm talking about pornography, I'm always like, what am I doing again? It is awkward, but it's so necessary because it relates to everybody. Everybody has, a sex drive, and they want to talk about it, and they want healing where they need healing. And so I would just encourage every church to take it on and definitely talk about it, because people want to talk about it.
But with kind of the leadership that, that Morgan is talking about and Josh is talking about, because we have false pastoral information as well. So I think you have to be very cautious.
Not every church is a safe church.
No.
That's
and-
true,
Yeah,
unfortunately.
and, but what Morgan has done, and, there was somebody else, I forgot now. But anyway, what Morgan has been doing, these kinds of things, this is safe, and this is from youth. I mean, I think it's fantastic, don't you? Yeah. Fantastic. And this opens the door for the right kind of education in the right way, and I'm thrilled to have the opportunity to be with these lessons.
While you're talking, I want to walk through both of you in just one takeaway that you can give them. What's one practical thing that you would exhort them to do?
Well, the practical exhorting thing I would say is I brought, I think, 14 of these, the videos. You must be knowledgeable. The way that you're able to counteract the false information is to have the right information, to know our history and know how all this happened. So I only have a few, and they're $10, and I don't have any, you
How
know.
do we get them if you don't have enough? Right.
Right.
Because a lot of us are going to complain.
Can you get them on your website?
On my website? Oh, no, I don't sell it. I just got the, you can get it on from WorldNet Daily, I think has something. Chris, I don't know, yeah, it's a good question.
Oh, here,
thank
there's a.
You can tell she
it
makes a
says-
lot of money off of
Yeah.
these things, right?
It says contact info on the bottom right here. There's a website and a phone number. It might, I am not involved with this. Okay, it's.
Good, thank you.
Okay, adulamfilms.com, ADULLAM films.com, or there's a toll-free number. Do you want that?
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
that's 1-888-780-5049.
Can
Yeah.
you say that one more time?
Sure. 1-888-780-5049.
And the name of it is
Kinsey syndrome.
Kinsey
The
syndrome.
Kinsey
If you just
syndrome.
Google Kinsey syndrome, you'll probably get all the
Yeah,
information.
From Amazon
yeah,
or somewhere.
Yeah.
Well, thank you, Morgan, for your takeaway. No, I'm just kidding. Go ahead.
Oh, well, I would say the same thing, actually. Education, and I would recommend the Sex and Money film because it's specific to the United States and it does address pornography and prostitution, all those things. So that's sexandmoneyfilm.com.
Is the and spelled out?
It is. Everything's spelled out. Sexandmoneyfilm.com.
Well, let me mention, if you actually got a huge group together and played, say, the Kinsey syndrome, and then followed with, I mean, you could do a whole series for your church.
The history.
Because this is the history and that, and it's somewhat the result too, but this is the real, quote, hard, of where it is right now. So this could be a wonderful series for a church for, several times to train your people, your families and parents.
Thank you all so much for coming.
Thank you.